Welcome, fellow travelers. As your historian and guide on this incredible journey following the path of the core of discovery, I am just absolutely thrilled we've made it here. We started our travels together way back in St. Charles, Missouri, just like they did, and well, here we are standing at Three Forks, Montana. This is where the mighty Missouri River essentially ends. Now, for us in our modern travel group, this is a beautiful, scenic stop to stretch our legs, right? But for Meriwether Lewis, William Clark, and their team back in the late summer of 1805, the true life-or-death adventure begins right outside your windows. So as we look out over this incredible landscape today, let's use this explainer to unpack exactly how they survived what came next.
So, put yourself in their shoes for a second. Imagine being Meriwether Lewis, finally standing at the Continental Divide at Lemhi Pass. Up to this exact point, President Thomas Jefferson had believed, and so the expedition firmly believed, that they'd find a short, super easy portage connecting the Missouri River to some navigable river flowing straight out to the Pacific Ocean. They really thought they'd just, hop over a small, gentle mountain ridge and be right back on the water in no time. Instead, Lewis reaches that pass, looks west, and faces just a crushing and terrifying realization.
The sheer weight of his journal entry really says it all. He wrote that he saw immense ranges of high mountains still to the west. Looking at those daunting, snow-capped Rocky Mountains stretching out literally as far as the eye could see, the expedition knew instantly that the long-held dream of an all-water Northwest Passage was entirely dead. There was no easy river route, period. Sheer survival was now their absolute #1 priority, because they had to cross those peaks before the lethal mountain winter hit. The Corps was now staring down a brutal logistical nightmare. First, they hit the end of navigable water. That meant they had to somehow execute a treacherous overland mountain crossing, and then, hopefully, find a westward-flowing river on the other side. This forced a party of 33 people to transition completely from watercraft, and remember, they'd been dragging and poling heavy boats up the Missouri for over a year, to relying entirely on pack animals just to transport their gear and themselves across this untamed, vertical wilderness.
Part 1. Securing the Shoshone horses.
To cross those harrowing, jagged peaks before the snows trapped them, they desperately needed pack animals. Without them, the portage across the Rockies would have been literally impossible. It was a massive, high-stakes race against time, where every single day brought the winter closer to the mountain passes, and their salvation actually hinged entirely on what you could only call a providential miracle. During a crucial council meeting with the Shoshone tribe, their interpreter, Sacagawea, who, remember, had been captured from her people 5 years earlier, suddenly recognized the Shoshone chief, Kameawait. It was her long-lost brother. Lewis wrote that the reunion was really affecting. She immediately embraced him, completely bridging an incredible cultural gap in a single instant.
And that tearful family reunion wasn't just emotionally moving, it facilitated some very complex, life-saving diplomacy. Through Sacagawea's intervention, the Corps managed to trade about $100 worth of goods. We're talking things like coats, flags, and medals for an initial 29 absolutely essential horses. They also secured a Shoshone guide they nicknamed Old Toby. With 29 horses and a local guide who actually knew the terrain, they finally had a fighting chance to make it over the divide.
Part 2. Surviving the Bitterroot Mountains.
Leaving their camp at a spot they aptly named Traveler's Rest in early September, the Corps plunged straight into the dark, towering peaks of the Bitterroots along an ancient indigenous route we now call the Lolo Trail. Now, this is widely considered the most dangerous and physically demanding segment of their entire 2.5-year journey. Contrast the summer heat of towing those heavy boats up the Missouri River with this grim reality. They were suddenly freezing under 2 inches of snow, traversing steep, rocky cliffs, and suffering near starvation for 11 grueling days. The game they usually relied on for food had completely disappeared from the high elevations. Even their expert hunters like George Droulard couldn't find deer or elk. They actually became so desperately hungry that they had to kill and eat their own pack horses, including 3 colts, just to stay alive. And when even the horse meat became scarce, the desperate men were forced to consume this stuff: portable soup. Lewis had actually made up this concoction of dried materials back in Philadelphia, specifically as a last resort. It was, by all accounts, a vile-tasting, gelatinous broth. You basically poured boiling water on it and stirred it up. The men absolutely hated it, but hey, it kept them from starving to death in the Bitterroots. It's just a stark reminder of the sheer, raw endurance required on this trail.
Part 3. Sanctuary with the Nez Perce.
Finally emerging from the mountains in late September, the expedition was completely bedraggled, starving, and pushed to the absolute limits of human endurance.
They stumbled out of those treacherous peaks and down onto the welcoming meadows of the Weipa Prairie in present-day Idaho, where they encountered the camps of the Nez Perce people. Now, the Nez Perce saw these strange, bearded, starving men and, frankly, could have easily destroyed them right then and there. Some of them were understandably suspicious. But historical accounts tell us a Nez Perce woman who had previously been captured and lived among white people assured her tribe that these strangers could be trusted. So Chief Twisted Hair and his people offered extraordinary generosity. They provided a real lifeline of dried salmon and a sweet bread prepared from camas roots. Now, gorging themselves on this rich new diet initially made the starving men violently sick. They were barely able to even ride a horse. But it ultimately saved their lives and allowed them to recover their strength.
As their health slowly returned, their logistics shifted entirely once again. They were trading the memories of that massive 55-foot keel boat they used on the Missouri River for 5 Ponderosa pine dugout canoes. Leaving their hard-won horses in the careful custody of the Nez Perce, they used fire to hollow out these massive logs right there on the banks of the Clearwater River. The Nez Perce graciously guided them in this crucial construction, changing their mode of transport back to what they knew best.
Part 4. Back to the water.
After the horrific ordeal of that overland crossing, at a spot they appropriately named Canoe Camp, the Corps of Discovery was finally ready to return to their natural element. By October 6th, the canoes were finished, and it was time to make the final, rapid push to the Western Ocean. Leaving the mountains behind, they launched on the Clearwater River, which fed into the Snake River, and finally dumped them right into the massive, powerful Columbia River. And instead of portaging around the dangerous rapids of the dense Columbia River Plateau, they bravely and, maybe a little bit recklessly, plunged straight through them in their new dugouts, hurtling toward the Pacific Ocean.
So as you look out at the landscape today from the comfort of our tour, consider this for a moment. Would the Corps of Discovery have survived the Bitterroots without the providence of indigenous alliances? I mean, really think about it. This triumphant return to the water and their ultimate arrival at the Pacific was only possible because of the horses from the Shoshone, the diplomacy of Sacagawea, and the life-saving sanctuary provided by the Nez Perce. It absolutely leaves us to wonder how radically the map of the continent might have changed without them. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer of their remarkable journey, and keep that question in the back of your mind as we head west.